My name is Cassidy Ray Morgan. I'm 34, and last night, my family took the only home I've ever felt safe in and handed me a suitcase instead. The green one I used when I left for college. I'd spent the whole day cooking, scrubbing, even ironing napkins I didn't care about, just to host a simple dinner. One dinner. One chance to prove maybe I still belonged. Instead, I got silence during dessert. And a 5-minute speech about refocusing my energy. 9. Have you ever stood in your own kitchen and felt like a guest in someone else's story? Drop a comment if you've ever been told it's not personal while everything about it was. What happened after that dinner changed everything. But first, let me take you back to the moment I knew I was being erased. The casserole was still warm when I set it on the table, but nobody noticed. Leah was too busy scrolling her phone, and Dad hadn't even taken off his boots before sitting down. He glanced around the dining room like he was surveying a remodel. I saw his eyes skim the new paint I chose, the shelves I built by hand, and the old mason jar lights I'd rewired myself. He didn't say a word about any of it. I smiled anyway. Reflex, not joy. Mom used to say you can will a moment into something softer if you hold your shoulders still and keep your voice gentle. She left when I was 17. I think about that more often than I let on. Smells like rosemary, Leah muttered, finally. It's time, I said, laughing under my breath. And garlic. And a little hope. She looked up briefly, blinked like she didn't get the joke, then went back to scrolling. Dad poured himself water, ignoring the wine I'd chilled. The good one. The one with the handwritten label from the farmer's market he never liked. We ate in weird silence, the kind that has a shape to it. Thick at the edges, hollow in the middle. I tried twice to ask about Leah's new listing and once about Dad's knee, but the answers came in single syllables. Halfway through dessert, homemade cobbler, because store-bought felt like cheating. Dad set his fork down. Not dropped. Not tossed. Placed. Deliberate. I'm glad you've done well for yourself, Cass, he said. He only called me Cass when he was about to shift the earth. This house. He looked at Leah, then back at me. It's time to put it to better use. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady. What does that mean? Leah folded her napkin, always the peacemaker when it suited her. It's just too much space for one person. And Dad's been needing something easier to access, something all on one floor. You want to move in? I asked. No, she said quickly. It's not personal. That phrase again. The one people use when they're about to rearrange your life. Dad stood and reached for something, leaning against the wall behind him. A green suitcase. Mine. The same one I used when I left for college. We packed the essentials, Leah said, still seated, as if this was some kind of handoff ceremony. I didn't speak. I couldn't. They had planned this. Maybe for weeks. Maybe longer. My keychain felt heavy in my pocket. The one with the worn leather tag Mom gave me before she left. It used to say property of Cassidy, but the letters were fading. I walked to the counter, picked up my wallet and my phone, and pulled out the keys, the ones I'd polished earlier that day, thinking maybe tonight would feel like a beginning. I set them gently beside my wine glass. Nobody said thank you. Nobody said goodbye. I walked out to the driveway, suitcase dragging behind me like an afterthought. I didn't cry. Not then. But when I pulled onto the road and glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw Leah standing at the door, arms crossed, like a realtor posing for a listing photo. They had erased me. Just like that. I drove until the sky darkened and the gaslight came on. I stopped at the same station off Route 22 where I used to buy root beer as a kid. Saturday there in the car, lights buzzing above, the suitcase thudding in the back every time I shifted. It sounded like a heartbeat. Or maybe a countdown. And the thing is, I still wasn't angry. Not yet. Just stunned. Because when someone takes something from you in silence, it takes a minute to hear what's missing. Ashley didn't ask questions when I showed up on her doorstep after 10 p.m. with a suitcase and eyes that wouldn't meet hers. She just opened the door wider, turned down the thermostat, and said, "You want the couch or the guest room?" I chose the guest room. Not because I needed space, but because the couch reminded me too much of family movie nights, the kind where no one made eye contact and someone always left before the credits. Ashley's place was small, cozy in a way I hadn't realized I missed. Ceramic tile in the kitchen. A little humming fridge. A scented candle burning something vanilla and cheap and oddly comforting. She tossed me a spare key before heading to bed. Bathrooms down the hall, you remember. I did. I sat on the edge of the guest bed for a long time. Didn't change clothes, didn't cry. Just stared at the floral comforter and tried to find my name in it. But it felt like my name had been stripped off everything that once held it. The next morning, Ashley had already gone to work. A sticky note sat on the table with a smiley face and a line that read, "There's coffee and there's creamer, and no judgment if you drink both." The smell made something in me settle for a second. A muscle unclenched that I hadn't realized was tight. Until I opened my phone. There it was. On Leah's real estate page. My house listed as charming family home, fully staged, move-in ready. My kitchen was in the first photo. They'd swapped out the copper mugs I loved for generic white ones. The spice rack I'd alphabetized was gone, replaced with a bowl of lemons like some sad HGTV cliché. I clicked through fast, but it didn't help. My old bedroom. Now staged as a quiet office retreat. The bookshelf was still there. But every title was new. Self-help bestsellers. Business books with faux motivation in bold gold lettering. The last photo showed the backyard, with its crooked bird feeder and the maple tree with initials carved deep into its bark. CM+? I'd never finished the other half. I slammed the laptop shut and almost knocked over the coffee. I don't know how long I sat there, hands clenched in my lap, staring at the blank wall across from me. But by the time I moved again, my jaw ached from how hard I was holding it shut. I drove downtown to the county records office. It was one of those beige buildings from the 70s, where the lights flicker and everything smells faintly of toner and old carpet. The clerk was young. Barely old enough to rent a car, let alone understand the kind of betrayal that stains you. "I need to see if my name's on a property deed," I said. He looked up. "Owner name?" "Gerald Morgan." "And you are?" "His daughter," I said, then paused. "I lived in that house for over a decade. Paid for repairs. Handled every utility bill. My mother added me verbally before she left." He blinked. "Verbal won't show here." I nodded once. "Of course." He scrolled, typed, clicked. "Yeah, it's been under Gerald's name since it was built, transferred to a trust last year. Primary agents listed are Gerald Morgan and Leah Colton." My mouth opened, then closed again. Trust. Not even a shared inheritance. They locked me out on paper before they ever did it in person. I managed a thank you and walked out into the sticky Virginia heat. I wasn't even angry. Not fully. Just hollow. Ashley called around noon. "You good?" "Number. Want tacos?" "Yeah." When she showed up, I didn't speak, just handed her my phone with the listing still open. She stared, jaw tightening. "They listed it that fast?" I nodded. Ashley didn't say anything for a moment. Then she handed it back, pulled out her own phone, and scrolled. "Your name's not on the deed, right?" Apparently never was. She sucked in a breath. "Then Leah didn't just stage your bedroom. She scrubbed you from the record." I nodded again. "Cass." "Yeah?" She turned the phone toward me. A screenshot of a Facebook comment. Gerald had written, under the listing, "Proud to offer our family home to another generation." Not his. Our. I sat down hard. Ashley sat beside me. "You know this wasn't last minute. This was the plan." I didn't answer. But something inside me clicked. Not a spark. Not a scream. Just alignment. Because silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes it's strategy. I didn't mean to drive past it. I was just trying to clear my head, looping around town like I used to after long days, keys in the ignition, one arm out the window, music low enough not to matter. But my hands moved before my mind caught up, and before I knew it, I was turning down Sycamore Lane, easing past the hedge Gerald always trimmed too short. There it was. The house. My house. Only it didn't look like mine anymore. The porch had new planters, white ceramic ones, clean and soulless. The curtains in the front window were stiffer, pale blue instead of the soft linen ones I'd hemmed myself. Even the porch light had been swapped, no more warm amber. Just a cold LED spotlight that made the siding look gray. I pulled over slowly, parking across the street where I used to wait for Ashley when we were kids, and she'd sneak out to meet me under the maple tree. The for sale sign wasn't there. But the lights were on. And the front door opened. A woman stepped out. Mid-derdix, maybe younger. Blonde bob, leggings, oversized hoodie. Clipboard in hand. She paused on the porch, looked around, and then turned back toward the doorway. I watched as a man followed her out, tall, button-up shirt, pointing to the kitchen window like he had a right to it. I knew that window. It stuck on cold mornings. You had to lean into it to close it properly. I wanted to yell that. Wanted to shout, "That kitchen belongs to a woman who patched that ceiling 3 times and rewired the pantry outlet herself." But I didn't. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel like it might anchor me. The woman stepped off the porch, waved at the man, and walked toward her car. A real estate decal was on the back window. Leah's Company. Of course. I lowered my gaze, suddenly aware of how exposed I felt. Like I was trespassing on my own past. And then I saw it. The tree. Still there, just off the side of the porch. The maple. Bark a little thicker now. Leaves starting to turn at the edges. And at the base, carved into the trunk, still visible after all these years. CM+? I had done that when I was 12. Scraped into it with my house key after school one day, when crushes felt permanent and secrets could be etched into trees. They hadn't sanded it off. Or maybe they didn't even notice it was there. For a moment, I smiled. Not a happy smile. Not even a smug one. Just the kind that leaks out when you realize they couldn't erase everything. I started the car and backed out slow. Didn't look at the porch again. Didn't need to. Later that night, I pulled out my old accordion folder from the bottom of my suitcase. The one I used for receipts and legal forms and junk I told myself I'd organize someday. I laid everything out on Ashley's dining table. Water bills. HVAC receipts. Home Depot invoices. Photos of me painting the trim in cut-off jeans and a bandana. Screenshots of text threads with Gerald ones where I offered to pay for the fence repair and the roof patch and the busted dishwasher. He'd always say things like, "You've got more time than me," or "Handle it and I'll settle up." But he never did. And I stopped asking. Because asking always came with a lecture. Or a look. Or the kind of silence that made the room colder. I started sorting everything by year. Not because I had a plan yet, but because holding it in my hands made something real again. Ashley walked in, holding a bowl of popcorn. "Please tell me you're not prepping for court already." "I don't know what I'm doing," I said honestly. She sat down, scooped a few kernels into her mouth, and looked at the spread. "Looks like evidence to me." "Evidence of what?" I asked, half laughing. "That I was too trusting?" "That you weren't just living there," she said. "You were investing in it. That's not just emotional equity. That's sweat equity." I paused. Sweat equity. My chest tightened. I remembered scrubbing mold out of the basement for 2 days after the hurricane. I remembered fixing the hot water heater when Gerald was at his buddy's fishing camp. I remembered paying the plumber out of my own checking account after Leah flushed a ring down the guest bathroom sink and blamed me for poor pipe planning. I had built that house in 100 quiet ways. And now they were showing it off like a blank canvas. I leaned back, feeling a kind of ache I couldn't place. Ashley slid over a cold soda from the fridge. "You don't have to know what to do with it yet, but keep it, all of it." I nodded slowly. She was right. Because houses aren't made of bricks and wood. They're made of handprints. And mine were still there, whether they wanted to admit it or not. Ashley loaned me her car the next morning, a decade-old Subaru with a cracked dashboard and a pine-scented air freshener that had long since given up. "I'm working till 4, she said, handing me the keys. "Don't set it on fire unless you're really ready." I gave her a weak smile. No promises. Downtown was quiet for a Thursday. Just a few cars angled into sun-baked spaces, and a Tractor Supply truck parked half on the curb like nobody cared. The courthouse squatted at the end of Main Street, beige and blocky, with faded American flags flapping half-heartedly on either side of the door. Inside, it smelled like toner, coffee that had been left too long on the burner, and something vaguely lemony, probably from the janitor's closet. I waited in line behind a woman disputing a property line and a guy paying traffic tickets with quarters. When it was my turn, the clerk didn't even look up. "Name on the property?" "Gerald Morgan," I said. "Relation?" "Daughter. I used to live there. I paid for most of the repairs. I have documentation." He finally looked up. "Documentation doesn't make you an owner." "I know," I said. I'm trying to figure out what I can do." He sighed, clearly ready to redirect me to nowhere, when a voice behind me cut in. "Try room B203. Ask for Evie." I turned. A woman in her late 50s stood there with a stack of manila folders and a cup of something that smelled like black tea and bourbon. She nodded toward the hallway. "She handles estate quirks and family messes. You're not the first." Room B203 was at the end of a narrow hall lined with corkboards and peeling paint. The door was cracked, light pouring across the carpet like it didn't belong there. Evie Porter sat behind a desk that looked like it hadn't been moved since the Reagan era. She wore jeans, boots, and a blazer sharp enough to cut drywall. "You Cassidy?" she asked without standing. "Yes, ma'am." "No, ma'am. I left my Southern politeness in my second divorce." I smiled, surprised by the ease of it. Evie nodded toward the chair. "Let's hear it." I told her everything. From the dinner to the suitcase. From the for sale listing to the receipts Ashley helped me lay out like puzzle pieces. I handed over a few of the emails I'd printed, including one where Gerald had told me, "Handle the plumbing, I'll make it up to you." She read fast, eyes flicking like headlights through fog. "This your handwriting?" she asked, holding up a sticky note with a grocery list and a reminder to pay the utility bill. "It is." "Good. That matters more than you think." I stared at her. "What?" She leaned back in her chair and folded her hands. "You're not on the deed, that's bad. But you've got a paper trail a mile long that shows responsibility, maintenance, and intent. Depending on the state law and how bold your family's been, this isn't just moral theft. It could brush up against civil fraud." I swallowed. "Even if they didn't forge anything?" Evie shrugged. "They didn't have to. Silence can be strategic, too. Especially if they planned to push you out once the house was ready to list." I blinked, surprised at how much that made sense and how much it hurt. She looked at me again, longer this time. "You said you were a notary?" "Mobile notary and legal clerk. Mostly wills, small contracts." "Then you know enough to understand this. The law doesn't reward heartbreak, but it does reward paper." I nodded slowly. Evie opened a drawer and pulled out a file. "Start with this checklist. Everything you can document: dates, payments, messages, repairs. The more the better. Photos, too, especially timestamps." This. I reached for the folder, but she didn't let go. "You sure you want to do this?" "I'm not after revenge," I said. "I just want my story to exist somewhere other than their version of it." She let go of the folder. "Good answer." I stood, folder clutched in my hands like a shield. Before I left, I turned back. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "What made you stop doing divorces?" Evie smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. One too many cases where the house got more protection than the woman who held it together. That stayed with me all the way back to Ashley's "Bide ever bidey." That and the way she said, "The law rewards paper." I spent the rest of the afternoon sorting every folder, envelope, and screenshot into labeled piles. Some of it made me laugh, like the handwritten note from Leah saying, "Don't forget Dad's blood pressure meds." Again. scribbled like a to-do list, tossed in my mailbox like I was the help. Some of it made me shake. One bill was for the septic tank pump 2 winters ago, $1,200 out of pocket. I remembered standing in the cold for 3 hours waiting on the truck, the smell of rot rising from the backyard like a punishment. Gerald had said, "You're used to getting your hands dirty, you'll manage." That was the moment I realized I stopped being a daughter and started being a placeholder. I held the receipt tight between my fingers. Like kindling. Like firewood. The thing about pain is that sometimes it feels like fuel. After 3 straight nights sorting receipts and tagging photos, I convinced myself I was ready not for court, not for revenge, but for clarity. For proof. For presence. So when I saw Leah's flyer at the coffee shop, a printed open house announcement taped to the corkboard like any other small-town weekend event, I took it as a sign. Saturday, 2 to 4 p.m. Sycamore Lane. The house that used to be mine. Ashley offered to come. I told her no. I needed to walk in alone. The driveway was full when I got there. A couple families stood on the lawn with plastic shoe covers in hand. The porch smelled like citrus cleaner and panic. Leah always overdid both. I hovered near the door for a second before stepping inside. The floors gleamed in a way they never did when I lived there, which meant they'd probably hired a stager. The entry rug was gone, replaced with something beige and forgettable. They'd even swapped out the doorbell cover. But the air still held a trace of lavender. Me lavender. I'd tucked dried sachets inside the vent grates years ago after a mouse got into the pantry. That scent had clung to the ductwork like memory. "Welcome in." Leah's voice chirped from the kitchen. She wore a coral blazer, the one she used in all her promo videos. Her smile dimmed the second she saw me. "Cass," she said flatly. "Just browsing," I replied, matching her tone. She didn't move from behind the counter. Just shifted her stance and crossed her arms. I saw the brochure stacked beside her glossy pages with bullet points like newly refreshed and ideal for multi-generational living. No mention of the daughter they'd thrown out with a suitcase. I walked through the living room slowly, absorbing every sterile corner. The couch was different, the frames were different, but the shadows on the walls, those hadn't moved. I turned the corner into the dining room and nearly stopped breathing. The measuring tape was out. A young couple mid-30s, maybe newlyweds, were standing at the far wall, stretching it from the window to the buffet area. The man was jotting numbers into his phone. "Big enough for a piano," he said casually. I almost laughed. I remembered how we used to fit 12 folding chairs in that room every Thanksgiving. How Leah once dropped cranberry sauce on the rug and blamed me. How Gerald insisted the table face the window for natural light and natural judgment. The tape measure didn't account for any of that. "It's not the size that matters," I said aloud, more to myself than anyone else. The man turned, confused. "Sorry?" "Nothing," I muttered, stepping back toward the kitchen. That's when I saw him. Gerald. He walked in from the side door like he owned the weather. Same boots, same smug half-smile. He looked me over like I was a squeaky floorboard. "Thought you might show," he said. I said nothing. "Just wanted to see how the place cleaned up," he added, voice loud enough for others to hear. "I wanted to see what you erased," I said quietly. Leah moved closer, her smile frozen in place. "Let's not make a scene." I looked at her. "I didn't bring the scene. You staged it." A silence fell between us. Gerald chuckled. "Always dramatic. You were born looking for something to fight." I swallowed hard. "I didn't come to fight." Then why come at all?" Leah asked. There it was. The edge. The practiced tone just loud enough, just dismissive enough to tilt the balance. I opened my mouth to respond, but she cut in again. "She's been going around town, you know," she said to no one in particular. "Digging through paperwork, telling people she was forced out." The couple with the tape measure exchanged a look. Leah leaned in slightly. "Cass, you need to be careful, you're not well. You haven't been for a long time." The room spun for a second. There it was, the word. Unstable. The family favorite. The one they used when I was 17 and grieving. The one they used after mom left. The one they pulled out like a fire alarm whenever I got too loud. I stepped back. Okay, I said softly. And I left. The air outside was thick, but I gulped it anyway. I didn't cry. Not this time. Not even when I heard Gerald laughing behind the screen door. I got in Ashley's Subaru and sat in silence for a while. That house never measured square footage. It measured silence. Dismissals. Weight you can't put on paper. I was just about to pull out when someone knocked on the passenger window. An older woman, Mrs. Kearns. Lived 2 doors down when I was growing up. Always wore pink foam curlers after 5 p.m. I rolled down the window. She leaned in, eyes kind. You know they're behind on the taxes, right? I blinked. What? She nodded. Rumor is, they let it lapse. Auction notice might go out next month. County's quiet about it, but it's coming. I stared at her. Thought you should know, she said. Then turned and walked away. I sat there for a long time. The tape measure lied. But numbers? Numbers never do. I didn't sleep the night after the open house. I laid on Ashley's couch, the throw blanket bunched around my legs, replaying Leah's voice over and over in my head. She's not well. It wasn't even the words, it was the way she said them. Measured, public. Like a PR statement, like a sister who wanted to sound concerned while pulling the pin. But what stuck deeper than her voice was Mrs. Kearns' whisper. Auction, next month, quiet. The next morning, I called the county office from my car in the Food Lion parking lot. Told them I was just curious about how tax auctions worked. The woman on the other end sounded like she'd been answering the same questions for 30 years. If the property's behind by 2 years or more, it can go to public auction. All notices are posted at the courthouse and online. It's sealed bids now, no live auction. Quiet title follows if no challenges are filed. Or, can someone bid through a representative? I asked. As long as that person can prove funding and ID, yes. I wrote everything down on a napkin from my glove box. Then circled one word 3 times. Representative. That night, I knocked on Mateo's door. He lived on the edge of town in a split-level fixer-upper with a chain-link fence that hadn't been fully repaired since the last windstorm. He opened the door wearing a faded t-shirt that said, I void warranties. Same Mateo. Same crooked smile. Cass, he said, blinking. This a social call or a plumbing emergency? Something in between. He stepped aside. Come in. His place smelled like cedar and warm tortillas his mom had taught him both. On the coffee table sat a half-disassembled space heater and a plate of chicken taquitos. I didn't sit. I need a favor, I said. He raised an eyebrow, then motioned toward the couch. You want to eat first or explain first? I sat. 10 minutes later, he leaned back and let out a low whistle. You're telling me you want me to bid on your old house? Not as a stunt. As a legal buyer. Quiet auction, sealed bid, no attention. And you'd give me the money to do it? Yes, every cent. I just need to stay out of it on paper, for now. He ran a hand through his hair. Cass, this isn't a small thing. If it goes wrong. It won't, I said. I already checked with Evie. She's reviewing the back taxes. It's not a huge sum. And if I file anything, Gerald and Leah will drag it out. This way, it happens quietly. Clean. I just need your name. He was quiet a long time. Then he asked, why me? I swallowed. Because I trust you, I said. And because you know what it feels like to lose a home and not have anyone believe you earned it. His jaw tightened. He'd lost his house in a divorce 3 years back, signed the deed over for peace. I never pushed him on it, but I knew it still ached. Mateo stood, grabbed a soda from the fridge, and tossed me one. All right, he said. Let's make some small-town history. We met again the next morning at the courthouse. Evie was already there, clipboard in hand, 2 copies of everything ready to go. She's thorough, Mateo whispered as we walked in. Thank God, I whispered back. Inside, Evie filed the paperwork under Mateo's name, submitted the bid, and requested confirmation of receipt. The clerk barely looked at us. Another Tuesday. When it was done, we walked out into the sun, squinting. Mateo held up the receipt like it was a lottery ticket. That's it? That's it, I said. Now we wait. The next 2 weeks crawled. I still had my notary jobs driving from door to door, watching people sign wills and power of attorney forms while I pretended my life was normal. Ashley checked in every night. Evie stayed tight-lipped, but she sent one text halfway through week 2 that said, "No new filings, no one's contesting." Then, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, Mateo called. "It's ours," he said. My hands started shaking before I could speak. "Ours?" Certified letter came in. "Your bid was accepted. No other offers." "We got the house, Cass." I sank down onto the floor of my car, soaked and breathless. It was the first real breath I'd taken in weeks. Not because it was done. Because I'd done it quiet. Because they didn't see it coming. Later that night, Mateo dropped off the envelope thick with confirmation forms, tax clearances, a closing date. On top of the stack was a handwritten note in Evie's script. "Keep this copy. They can't say you never existed anymore." I held it for a long time. Felt the weight of it in my hands. A title that didn't have my name yet but was already mine in spirit. They forced me out with a bag. I just bought the roof over their heads. And they hadn't even noticed the storm rolling in. The envelope arrived 2 days after the deadline. Cream-colored. Hand-stamped. Not certified, but official enough to make your stomach drop. Ashley handed it to me without a word. Just held it out across the kitchen counter like a loaded weapon. I turned it over slowly. It was postmarked 3 days ago. The address on the front: Gerald Morgan, Sycamore Lane. They'd missed the window to appeal. The house was mine. Not in theory. Not in fragments. Not in paper trails taped to manila folders. Mine. I slid the envelope back across the counter. "They don't know yet," I said quietly. Ashley raised an eyebrow. "And when will they?" I took a breath. "Soon." She leaned against the fridge, arms crossed. "You want backup?" I shook my head. "Not yet." Later that evening, Mateo came by with a bag of takeout and a 6-pack of that off-brand ginger beer he knew I liked. He handed me a small padded envelope along with the food. "What's this?" He shrugged. "Found it in my glove box, thought you might want it back." Inside was a key. Not just any key. The one I'd given him years ago when he used to fix the furnace in the winter or feed my plants when I worked late shifts. It still had the little crocheted tag my mother made teal with a loose stitch on the side where the thread had pulled. I turned it over in my palm, speechless. "I didn't think you'd remember," he said, watching me. "I forgot I ever gave it to you," I said. "But you didn't." Didn't feel right tossing it. I swallowed, suddenly unsteady. This key didn't just unlock a door. It unlocked time. I tucked it into my back pocket without a word. The next morning, I got up early and drove to the house. Not to storm in. Not to make a scene. Just to see. It was quiet when I pulled up. The open house signs were gone. The porch light was still that harsh white LED, but the yard looked neglected, overwatered patches near the walkway, weeds curling up around the base of the mailbox. I parked across the street and waited. At 10:15, the mail truck pulled up. Slowed. Then passed the house entirely. No delivery. That was when I knew. They hadn't received the final notice. Not yet. Because it had come to me. That mail was supposed to go to them. It missed. It rerouted. I looked up at the porch. The curtains were open now, different than last week. The living room still staged, but empty of life. I didn't get out of the car. Just sat there with the key burning in my pocket. It would have been easy to walk up and knock. To watch Gerald open the door and see his eyes shift from smug to stunned. To hand him the paperwork and say, "You lost." But I didn't. Because this wasn't about them anymore. That night, I pulled the file from my dresser and reviewed every line. Evie had already emailed me the finalized deed transfer, Mateo's name listed as intermediary, but mine in bold beneath it as transferee. Legally, it was airtight. Emotionally, still murky. Ashley came by the next day with 2 coffees and a look I knew too well. "You saw them, didn't you?" I nodded. "They don't know yet." She took a sip. "You gonna tell them?" "No," I said. "Not directly." She looked at me for a long moment, then set her coffee down and said, "Then let it unfold." Almost. That afternoon, Leah posted a photo on her real estate page. Just listed. Back on the market, motivated sellers. Inquire by Friday. My stomach flipped. I forwarded the photo to Evie, who responded in 5 words. "She doesn't own it anymore." I stared at the screen, heart pounding. I didn't need revenge. But accountability? That was long overdue. Later that night, I pulled out the key again. Rubbed my thumb across the tag. Remembered all the times I'd locked that door behind me, arms full of groceries, feet sore from work, heart aching for a kind word that never came. I stood, put on my coat, and drove to the house. The street was empty. Porch light still on. No sign of Gerald's truck. I walked up the steps quietly, the wood still creaking in the same places it always had. My breath fogged in the cold. Then I reached for the door and slid the key into the lock. It turned. Not smoothly, but it turned. I didn't open the door, just held the knob for a moment and whispered to no one, "I'm home." The first time I walked back into the house, not as a guest, not as an intruder, but as the legal owner, the silence nearly knocked me over. It wasn't the quiet of abandonment. It was the kind of stillness that follows a storm. A final draft sealed after everything's been swept out. The key turned smoother this time. No resistance, no hesitation. The air was stale, like lemon cleaner and old wood left too long in the sun. I stood in the doorway for a moment, listening to nothing. No voices, no footsteps upstairs, no distant sound of Gerald's radio humming from the garage. Just me. And what was left. The kitchen was bare. Cabinets open, shelves wiped clean. Even the spice rack was gone. I checked the drawer near the stove, the one where I used to keep Mom's measuring spoons and a rogue flashlight that only worked when you shook it twice. Empty. I moved through the room slowly, fingers grazing familiar surfaces that no longer felt familiar. They'd taken the framed prints, the rug I'd picked out on a whim in Asheville, even the tiny brass hook I installed near the back door to hold grocery bags. Every trace of me removed. Except the wall in the hallway. I froze when I saw it. The faint outline of where the family photo used to hang, Mom, me, Gerald, and Leah. Taken just before Mom left. I was 12. Leah's smile had looked forced even then. They'd taken the frame but not patched the holes. A faint rectangle of cleaner wall against faded beige paint. I reached out and touched it. Not because it mattered. Because it did. In the master bedroom, the closet doors were left open. The hangers gone. The carpet showed marks from where the bed used to be. And on the nightstand, the cheap one we never upgraded, sat a sticky note. Just 4 words. It was never yours. No signature. But I knew Leah's handwriting anywhere. The looped W. The smug little period at the end. I didn't rip it up. Didn't throw it away. I pressed it flat and slid it into the drawer where I used to keep old greeting cards and extra stamps. Proof. I walked back into the hallway, legs heavy, throat tighter than I wanted to admit. They hadn't just packed up their things. They'd tried to erase my story. Strip it down to drywall and laminate. Make it easier to forget I was ever part of it. But forgetting only works when no one remembers. And I remembered everything. The creak on the 3rd step. The smell of burned toast that never left the kitchen vent. The chip in the baseboard from when I dropped Mom's sewing machine trying to carry it alone. I remembered all of it. Later that afternoon, I called Evie. She answered on the 2nd ring, voice calm as ever. "I'm in," I said. "I assumed," she replied. "You sound taller." I laughed. Just once. She updated me on a few loose ends, mostly paperwork I'd need to finalize for utilities and insurance. Then she said something that made my jaw tighten. Leah requested a delay on closing out the trust. She still thinks she owns it? I asked. She's trying to play innocent, but legally, she's out of moves. She doesn't know that yet, I muttered. Evie paused. You want me to file a cease and desist? Not yet, I said. Let her spin a little. Because this time, I wasn't going to knock on the door with proof. This time, the silence would do the talking. That evening, I sat on the floor of the living room with a slice of pizza and an old notepad I'd found in a kitchen drawer, the only thing they hadn't taken. On the front page, in my own handwriting, was a list. Fix porch light. Reseal attic window. Repaint baseboards. Add flower box under kitchen window. A to-do list I'd written 3 summers ago. Back when I still thought effort could be exchanged for affection. I looked up at the ceiling, still carrying a faint watermark from the old roof leak. And I smiled, because they'd forgotten the leak. But I remembered how to fix it. I picked the diner on purpose. Not the fancy brunch spot Leah liked to post about. Not the quiet cafe Gerald used to haunt for pancakes and talk radio. Just the old waffle cup off Route 18. Vinyl booths. Burned coffee. Waitresses who didn't care about small-town politics. Ashley offered to come with me. I said no. This wasn't a witness moment. This was closure, not for them. For me, I got there first. Chose the corner booth by the window, the one with a crooked salt shaker and a tear in the seat where a spring poked through. Gerald arrived before Leah. He didn't sit right away. Just stood there, sizing me up like a courtroom he'd forgotten how to win. Leah breezed in a few minutes later, sunglasses still on, phone in hand. She slid into the booth across from me like we were meeting for a brunch she hadn't planned. Cass, she said, smiling too wide. This is unexpected. I didn't return the smile. Gerald finally sat. No hello. No nod. Just a grunt. The waitress came by, poured coffee into all 3 mugs without asking, then vanished like a pro. Leah stirred hers like it needed taming. I set the folder on the table between us. Slim, clean. Just enough weight to make it undeniable. Gerald glanced at it, then back at me. I wanted you to hear this directly, I said. So there's no confusion. No excuses later. Leah laughed lightly. You could have just called. I tried calling when I lived in that house. For years. No one responded. Gerald finally spoke. If this is about guilt, you can spare it. It's over, you're out. The house is mine, I said. The table went still. I reached into the folder and pulled out a single page. Placed it gently in the center. Evie's official letter. Deed transfer. Time-stamped. Acquired through tax auction. Fully processed. Cleared title. Your appeal window closed 2 weeks ago. Leah's face dropped for half a second, just long enough for the mask to crack. You're bluffing, Gerald muttered. I slid the envelope closer. I have copies filed with the county and legal backups. Mateo handled the bid. Evie handled the transfer. Everything's documented. Leah leaned in. You manipulated this. I followed the law. I said calmly. You ignored the taxes. You ignored the trust responsibilities. You ignored me. So, I bought the house the same way anyone else could have, by paying what you owed. Gerald stared at the paper but didn't touch it. Then Leah tilted her head. You've always had a flair for the dramatic, Cass. But you're unstable, everyone knows it. You can't just... I reached into the folder and pulled out a flash drive. Set it down beside my mug. I have recordings of your voicemail, texts you forgot you sent. Screenshots, notes, receipts. A beat of silence. You want to say I'm unstable? Say it louder. Say it in court. Leah swallowed hard. Said nothing. Gerald finally leaned back, eyes narrowed. Why are you doing this? Because for once, I said, I want my name on the truth. I stood. Didn't touch my coffee. Didn't look away. I'm not asking you to understand or apologize. I'm not even asking you to believe me. I'm done asking. Leah reached for the page in front of her, eyes flicking fast. I let her. Let her see the line with my name. Let her see the seal, the date, the stamp that couldn't be erased. I rebuilt every inch of that house while you watched. And when it was strong again, you pushed me out. I stepped back from the booth. I didn't come here to fight, I said softly. I came to be heard. Gerald said nothing. Just stared at the coffee like it owed him an answer. I turned to leave. But just before I reached the door, Leah called out. This won't fix anything, you know. Or. I paused. Half turned. No, I said. But at least now, it's mine to fix. I started with the porch light. Not because it mattered, but because I hated it. That cold white glare they'd installed after forcing me out, it made everything look harsher. Even the wood on the railing looked brittle under it. So I swapped it. Took it down one morning before sunrise, barefoot on the front steps in an old hoodie and Mateo's borrowed toolbox at my feet. Installed a soft amber bulb. Watched it flicker, then settle, like the house was exhaling. It was the first breath that felt like mine. The second came when I pulled up the weeds around the mailbox. They'd choked the little flower bed I planted 3 years ago, a bed Leah always called clutter. But now? I replanted it. Lavender, just like before. Ashley showed up with gardening gloves and 2 large cups of gas station coffee. She didn't ask what needed doing. Just knelt beside me and started pulling crabgrass. We worked in silence. The good kind. Later, inside, I opened the hallway closet to find the old paint cans still stacked in the corner. Most of them were dried out, but one, the soft green I used in the kitchen, still sloshed when I shook it. Mateo stopped by after work. This place is starting to smell like you again, he said, leaning in the doorway with a burrito in one hand and a level in the other. Should I be offended or grateful? I asked. Both, he grinned. That night, we re-leveled the pantry shelves. I didn't realize how uneven they'd gotten or how much it had bothered me until I saw them straight again. It's funny what small things can mean when everything else has been out of balance for so long. By the end of the week, the water heater was flushed, the baseboards repainted, and 2 windows recaulked. I had dust under my nails and splinters in both palms, but the ache felt honest. Better than any apology they never gave. On Saturday morning, I opened the attic for the first time in years. Not to clean it, just to know what had been left behind. I climbed the ladder slowly, flashlight tucked under my arm, unsure what to expect. It was mostly empty, a few broken Christmas lights, an old lamp, dust thick enough to write in. But in the far corner, tucked behind a crate of cracked mason jars, was a tin box. Me tin box. Rusty on the edges, with a small leather strap that had long since come loose. Inside, I found what I didn't know I'd needed. A faded photo of Mom holding a young me on the porch. Her smile was tired, but her eyes were soft. There was also a stitched handkerchief, blue thread on cotton with my initials in the corner. I remembered her making it during one of those rare quiet winters when she still baked and hummed in the kitchen. I sat down right there on the attic floor, knees pulled up, photo in one hand, cloth in the other. I didn't cry, but I did let myself sit in the memory for a while. Mom never came back for me. But somehow, she'd left something behind anyway. That evening, I hung the photo on the hallway wall where the old family portrait used to be. No frame. Just pinned gently to the plaster with a small tack. It was enough. Ashley came by with dinner, sloppy joes and grocery store pie, and we ate in the backyard on a pair of mismatched folding chairs. This place feels different, she said, looking around. It is, I said. Still feels like yours. I nodded. Now it finally is. Mateo arrived just before sunset with a box of firewood and a Bluetooth speaker. We lit a small fire in the pit I built years ago and never got to use. Gerald always said it was unnecessary. That night, we sat in lawn chairs wrapped in old quilts, listening to a playlist Ashley had made of 90s country and soft indie folk. The stars came out slowly. I looked at the house windows, warm, porch light soft, curtains half drawn, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel like I was standing outside something I'd been denied. I was in it. Of it. They took the cabinets, the rugs, even the spoons. But I still had the handkerchief, the key, the light. And now, the silence belonged to me. The water stain in the corner of the guest room had always bothered me. It started as a small shadow after a storm years ago, the kind of thing Gerald promised to fix and never did. He blamed it on the siding, then the roof, then on me for overwatering that damn flower bed. After everything else was done, paint touched up, curtains rehung, it was the last thing that needed patching. I set up a ladder, peeled back the damp drywall with a box cutter, and expected to find insulation. Instead, I found a tin tucked between the studs. Not a box. A tin, flat, square, rusted on the edges. Like someone had put it there on purpose. I held it in my hands for a long time before I opened it. Inside were two things. An envelope. And a small carved bird. The envelope was yellowed and soft with age, my name scribbled on the front in Mom's handwriting. I didn't open it right away. The bird was cedar. Hand-carved. No paint. Just natural wood smoothed down with time. Gerald used to whittle in the garage when I was little. Said it helped him think straight. I hadn't seen one of his carvings in over a decade. This one was unfinished. One wing still rough, no eyes. I set it down gently on the windowsill. Then I opened the envelope. It was dated 12 years ago. Cass, I don't know when you'll find this. Maybe never. But I needed to leave something in this house that wasn't pain. I know you're the one holding things together. I see it in how you patch the roof without asking. How you check the oven twice before Leah's birthday. How you refill your dad's meds without making a sound. You think we don't see you. But I do. I always have. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder before I left. I was tired. And I thought maybe if I left quietly, you wouldn't get torn in the middle. But I was wrong. They tore you anyway. If you ever feel like this house isn't yours, you are the only reason it ever felt like home. Love, Mom. I sat down on the floor and let the letter fall into my lap. Not because I was breaking, but because I finally had proof of everything I'd felt but could never prove. It wasn't just grief. It was validation, slow and quiet and long overdue. I stayed like that for a while, the tin in my lap, the unfinished bird watching over me like it understood. Then I heard the knock. Not the front door. The side one. The one off the kitchen that creaked and stuck on humid days. I didn't move. The knock came again. 2 short taps. I stood, palms still dusty from drywall, and walked slowly through the kitchen. Pulled open the door. Gerald stood there. Same coat. Same boots. Same vulnerable face. He looked at me like he expected something. Pity, maybe. Or permission. You're not supposed to be here, I said. I know. He didn't step forward. Just looked past me into the house. I came for my toolbox, he said after a long pause. I blinked. What toolbox? The old metal one. In the garage. My name scratched on the handle. I nodded once. It's still there. Another beat of silence. You fixed the porch light, he said. I did. He glanced down, then back up at me. It looks better. I let the quiet answer for me. He cleared his throat. Leah's upset. She usually is. She says you manipulated it. I followed the law, I said. He shifted his weight. That's not what I meant. I waited. Then, quietly, he said. She's not the only one who thought you'd leave. That landed harder than I expected. Not because it hurt, but because it was honest. I nodded. Well, I said, I'm still here. He didn't answer. Behind me, the kitchen ticked the old clock above the pantry I'd nearly thrown out last week. You want the toolbox? I asked. He hesitated, then nodded. I led him through the garage. It smelled like rust and rain-soaked concrete. The The metal box was exactly where I'd left it under the workbench, next to a stack of old paint trays. He reached for it, then stopped. "You kept it clean," he said. "I was raised to." He picked it up slowly, ran his thumb along the scratched name. Then softly, almost like a question, he said, "You found the bird?" I froze. "Upstairs. In the wall," I said. He nodded. "Didn't think you'd ever see it." I did. "A pause." "It wasn't finished," I added. "No," he said. "Neither were we." He didn't explain. Didn't apologize. Just walked back through the house with the box in his hands. At the threshold, he paused. "I won't come back again," he said. "Not unless you ask me to." "I won't," I replied. He nodded. "Once." Then he stepped off the porch and disappeared into the fading light. I didn't realize how much the house had changed until I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. Not just the paint, or the polished counters, or the re-leveled pantry. It was something quieter. The way the porch light didn't glare anymore. The way the air felt settled. The way I moved through the rooms without bracing myself for someone's comment, someone's absence. It wasn't the same house. Because I wasn't the same woman. Ashley arrived first that Sunday. She brought her infamous potato salad and a folding table that had seen better days. Mateo showed up next with lemonade, a toolbox just in case, and a Bluetooth speaker playing some mellow old country that didn't try too hard to sound like anything. Even Mrs. Kearns from down the street wandered over with a tray of deviled eggs and a smile that said, "It's about time." We sat in the backyard under the string lights I finally hung up. The fire pit flickered low, and the air smelled like grass and citronella and something clean, like a life just starting to breathe. No big toasts. No speeches. Just people who'd shown up. Who'd stayed. I stepped inside for a moment to grab more napkins, and when I walked past the hallway, I paused. The little carved bird still unfinished sat on the entry table beneath the photograph of my mother. No frame, just gently pinned. I dusted it that morning. Smoothed the cedar grain, like it might say something new. It never would. But it didn't need to. Some stories didn't get neat endings. Some people never found the words. But what they left behind still mattered. I heard laughter outside, Ashley teasing Mateo about his old jeans, Mrs. Kearns telling some story about her runaway cat from 1989, and I felt the tug of something rare. Not grief. Not even relief. Just stillness. Warm and earned. I stepped back onto the porch, barefoot, napkins in one hand, drink in the other. The sun had dipped low behind the tree line, casting long shadows on the lawn where I once raked leaves in silence, wondering what I had to do to be seen. Now, I didn't need to be seen. I was here. I'd built this home twice, once in sacrifice, once in truth. The first time, it broke me. The second time, it built me back. Mateo passed me a chair and said, "You think she'd be proud?" He didn't need to say who. I looked up at the lights. Felt the soft pulse of them overhead. Thought of the attic. The letter. The smell of cedar and old paper. "I think," I said slowly, "she'd be at peace." We sat in a comfortable hush. Later, when the food was gone and the fire down to embers, Ashley helped me gather plates while Mateo packed up the speaker. As they left, Ashley hugged me tight. No words. Just a squeeze that told me we'd both made it further than anyone thought we would. Mateo stayed back for a minute, glancing at the house like he wanted to say something. Instead, he handed me a small envelope. "What's this?" "Just something I found," he said. "From your old toolbox." I opened it after he left. Inside was a folded note. In my own handwriting. A list. Things I want to do one day. Sleep with the windows open. Paint the baseboards. Host a dinner without tension. Fix the porch light. Live somewhere I don't have to apologize for taking up space. I stared at it, stunned. I'd written it in pencil, years ago, probably after another fight, another dinner where I made myself small. Every item was checked off. I smiled. Then I folded the list again, tucked it into the bird's tin in the hallway drawer. Not everything unfinished stays broken. Some things, some people just take a little longer to find their shape. As I turned off the lights and locked the door for the night, I caught one last glance of the porch from inside. Amber glow. Lavender swaying. A home. Not the one they left me. The one I chose. And that was enough.